Okay, this is 4.6c. Number one, they want you to solve the equation by finding square roots. So what we're going to do first, because there's only one x there, let's isolate it. So let's add the 40 to the right-hand side. Then let's divide both sides by 5. So we have x squared equals 8. Then just take the square root of both sides. So x equals positive negative root 8. Or, if you remember from geometry or algebra 1, you can simplify the radical 8 and make it 2 root 2. At this point, I'm not going to require you to do that, but eventually during the year, I will. Alright, number 2, solve the equation. So for this one, you should recognize that on the left-hand side, what we have is a perfect square trinomial. So before you subtract 9 from both sides and get the trinomial on the left-hand side, what you should do is recognize that this is a perfect square trinomial. This is a perfect square, that's a perfect square, and if you double these up, you get the 10x. So the left-hand side can be factored as 5x plus 1 squared. So now what we can do is we can take the square root of both sides. So we have 5x plus 1 equals, the square root of 9 is 3, and remember we have to take the positive and negative roots. So we can write down positive negative root 3. Sorry, positive negative 3. Let's subtract 1 from both sides. So we have 5x equals positive negative 3 minus 1. As a last step, let's divide both sides by 5. So we have x equals positive negative 3 minus 1 divided by 5. This will give you two separate answers. The positive 3 minus 1 is 2, and 2 divided by 5 is 2/5. The negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4, and negative 4 divided by 5 is negative 4/5. So when I write down the solution, I can write down negative 4/5 and 2/5. To complete the square here, all we need to do is take half of the coefficient of x is 2, and then square that, and you get 4. Solve by completing the square. First thing you want to do is get everything on one side. So let's move everything to the left and put it in order. So we're going to subtract this 10x to the left. Next, we want to move the constant over. Since there's no coefficient of x squared, we're going to put the space, we're going to leave a space right there. The next step would have been to factor out the lead coefficient, but the lead coefficient is 1, so we can skip that step. Next step is going to be completing the square. So half of negative 10 is negative 5, and then you square that and you get 25. So we add 25 to both the left and the right side. That creates a perfect square trinomial on the left. It becomes x minus 5 equals 13, because negative 12 plus 25 is 13. Let's take the square root of both sides. So x minus 5 equals positive negative root 13. Then we just add 5 to the right. So we have 5 plus or minus root 13. Number 5. So for number 5, the constant is already moved to the right-hand side. So that first step is already done. The next step would be to factor out the lead coefficient, which is 25. So let's factor that out. When you factor out a 25 from 30x, it's going to be 30x divided by 25, which is 6/5 x. Let's leave a space, equals 12. Let's complete the square here. So half of 6/5, 2 cancels with the 6, is 3/5. And then when we take that and we square it, we get 9/25. So I'm going to add 9/25 inside. What I'm really adding, what I'm really doing is 25 times 9/25. The 25's cancel, so what I'm really doing on the left-hand side is adding 9. So I'm going to add 9 here. So 25 parentheses. This becomes x plus 3/5 squared equals 21. Divide both sides by 25. Then take the square root of both sides. Positive and negative root 21/25. And then as a last step, we subtract 3/5 from both sides. And at this point, it's okay to leave it like that. Number 6, rewrite it in vertex form. Okay, the first step is going to be to move the constant over to the left-hand side. So y minus 11/5 equals negative 1/5 x squared plus 4/5 x. Next step is to factor out the lead coefficient. So when I factor out negative 1/5 from 4/5 x, it's like me dividing 4/5 by negative 1/5. And when I do that, it's 4/5 times the reciprocal. 5's cancel, so it's just minus 4. So I'm going to have negative 4x and then leave a space. You can check to make sure you did that correct by supposing if you distribute the negative 1/5 in the parentheses, do you get these values? And you do. So now I want to complete the square in here. I take half of negative 4 is negative 2, and then I square negative 2, so I add 4 in here. What I'm really doing is I'm adding a negative 1/5 times 4. Negative 1/5 times 4 is negative 4/5. So what I'm really doing is I'm subtracting 4/5 from the right side. So I have to do that to the left. So I'm going to have y minus a negative 11/5 and a negative 4/5 comes out to be negative 15/5, which is negative 3. So y minus 3 equals negative 1/5. This is a perfect square trinomial. It's x minus 2 squared. It also asks you to find the vertex. So the vertex is going to be easy. It's 2, comma 3. So and these are your answers. All right, number 7, solve by factoring. So let's get everything on one side in order, and that's what you have. At this point, the order is good. There's no greatest common factor. The lead coefficient's positive. It's not a special pattern, so I'm just going to use trial and error. X and X. Different signs. Larger one's positive. What would multiply by what to give you 4, but add to give you 3? So that would be 4 and 1. So to solve, you have to take each of those and set them equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 4, I get x equals negative 4. Add 1, I get x equals 1. So those are your solutions, negative 4 and 1. Number 8, determine whether a quadratic model exists. So let's plot these points and see if they're collinear. Alright, so negative 1 comma 0.5 is right here. 0, 2 is right here. And 2, 2 is right here. So it's not collinear. So we can determine the quadratic model. So let's do that. Okay, so we have our calculator here. Let's go into Stat Edit mode. Let's enter L1. It's going to be negative 1, 0, and 2. For L2, we're going to have 0.5, 2, and 2. And then we hit Stat, Calc, Quadreg, Enter. So A is going to be negative 0.5, B is 1, and C is 2. So let's write those down. Negative 0.5, 1, and 2. So to write the function, it's going to be f of x equals negative 0.5x squared plus 1x plus 2. Number 9, this is a calculator problem, so let's quit out of this. I'll just hit y equals because we're going to be plotting this graph here. So negative 0.71 x squared plus 2. You can hit graph. And it says how many feet away will the stick land? So we want to find the 0 here. So second trace 2. Left bound is going to be anywhere before that. So enter. Right bound anywhere after. And then enter again. It's giving us 1.68 roughly. So 1.68, and it's in feet. Number 10, when completing the square for problem 3, explain why the third term is already assumed to be positive. Alright, so number 3 was this one here. So it's at x squared plus 4x plus blank. So this is what number 3 looked like. The question is, why is the plus sign already there? Why is it assumed that this term is going to be positive? Why can't it be negative? Well, this term is the result of half of this term squared. So it's going to be 4, positive 4. Now the reason why it's positive is because it's being squared. Regardless if this was a positive or negative, after you square it, it's going to turn it to be a positive anyway. So this has to be positive, because half of the middle term's coefficient is being squared. And whenever you square a value, you get a positive value. And that's the answer.